All right, there was one other video I saw out of the Hot Topics channel that looked really interesting. It was this one, an Action video. That was the betrayal that destroyed Bungie. Jesus. Action makes typically pretty damn good videos, so I have no idea what they're even talking about, like what the betrayal could be. So,
Bungie was one.
Other than maybe like, I don't know, Halo wasn't as good as people wanted it to be, but isn't like Halo Infinite made a lot of like strides? Isn't like the game like much better now than it used to be? Like that?
The most beloved game developer. Bungie was once the most beloved game developer in the world. They're the studio that created Halo, the minds that forged Destiny.
Oh, it's Bungie, not 343. Bad.
But things have changed so drastically over the last few years that the company is almost unrecognizable. Huge waves of layoffs, lawsuits from ex-employees, and hush money flying around to keep everyone quiet. It's a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of the company, when one man, one spy, seized control of it all and has been driving Bungie into the ground ever since. A shell of its former self, Bungie is ready to release their next game, Marathon, in 2020.
When did this come out? 4 weeks ago? May 15th? Wait, isn't that around the time that the Marathon stuff all came out? And this was probably already made? Oh no. Dude, that game is actually kind of already cooked.
25, but the
Feels
hype
bad.
is already gone. It would all begin with one deal which would change Bungie's fate forever, which happened back in 1999 when Bungie was acquired by a little-known company called Microsoft. For years, Bungie had been an up-and-coming rock star in gaming. They developed a few huge hits, but needed financial backing to get their latest project, Halo, off the ground. Microsoft offered them the money and resources they needed, as well as the support of the Microsoft brand. On paper, it was the opportunity of a lifetime, but the transition didn't go as smoothly as they'd hoped. Bungie wasn't used to deadlines and business plans, worrying about shareholders and stock prices. And once the team moved from Chicago to the Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington, they started to meet Microsoft execs who didn't exactly jive with Bungie's way of life. For Bungie, it was all about being creative, trying new things, and having fun. For Microsoft, making games was all about money, streamlining the creative process into an assembly line to create and sell content. Typically, when acquiring
This is all the way back in the 2000s, huh? Uh-oh.
a new company, Microsoft would absorb them into their way of life. For Bungie, that meant putting everyone on the same floor of some unmarked office building, having them file into their identical cubicles on Monday morning, and telling them to slave away to finish the game before the end of the quarter. But Bungie wasn't about to be another cog in the machine. Bungie made it clear to their new employers that they were different from the other studios that came before them. If Halo was going to get finished, it was going to be on their own terms. Receiving the message loud and clear, Microsoft backed off and let the team get to work. With Microsoft off their backs, it was time to focus on finishing Halo. Step one was to figure out what kind of game it was going to be. Originally, they envisioned an RTS and then a third-person shooter before finally landing on the first-person shooter we know today. This would turn out to be the right choice.
One of the greatest franchises of all time.
Players were put right in the middle of the action, meleeing elites, hopping into
You know what the hard truth is for people to understand though today? Is you'll never recapture this. It's not possible. It just won't. Everyone sucked at games so back then. That's like the slow pace is what was so good. Like the slow pace was great because everyone sucked. No one was good. It was just a bunch of kids and dads and you know 9-to-5ers playing every day. And now you've got, you know, people who it's like me, who it's like your whole career is like you're playing games all day, you're on every day. You have kids that are home that wake up with a controller in their hand when they first are born. You hand them a controller, they do nothing but learn when they're 4, 5, 6, 7. By they're 12 years old, 13 years old, 14-year-old, they're insane. Then they're chasing being a pro player by 15 or 16. And so the speed of those games and the speed of people learning stuff is so high and so fast that you'll never capture it again, unless you're talking like single player story. Like single player story for sure will, but not that. It won't. It is what it is. It is what it is. Streamers ruin gaming. You know, I see a lot of people always say streamers ruin gaming. You know what's actually very funny? Okay, side note, sidetrack. We'll go over it one of these days. I've already seen people start to say that Rivals is ruined by streamers, and people are like, what are you guys talking about? Wasn't this game always focused towards casual players? How the they've done it? They've done nothing but listen to the casual players. And I'm like, oh no, the accountability. Anyways, not the point. Even if you literally executed every single one of them, like you'd still have like the kids who are like born with a controller in the hand and hardcore grinding to 14, 15, 16. Like the safe hours to play would only be from like 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m. every day. And then after that, you'd get cooked. And oh, wait, that means you're at work during those hours. So it really wouldn't change anything. It just people got better. People got better at games. So you'll never be able to recapture that magic, unfortunately.
Vehicles and seeing through the eyes of Master Chief. With the incredible 3D graphics, the open world level designs, and the iconic soundtrack and story, creating an FPS felt like the right choice. And when Halo released alongside the original Xbox on November 15th, 2001, people were blown away. Halo sold over 1 million units in its first few months, and Microsoft immediately asked Bungie to start working on a sequel. Eager to continue building on the universe they just created, they agreed, but had to reconsider their position because they didn't receive nearly as much money from the first game's success as they had expected. Apparently, Microsoft wasn't big on profit sharing, and if Bungie figured out a way to negotiate out of their contract, they could go back to being independent and potentially make a lot more money. But Microsoft knew they had something special and wanted to make sure Bungie stayed with the company. So, for Halo 2, they went to the negotiating table.
It always comes
Bungie
down
knew they had a lot of
to
leverage given the success of the first
money.
game, but needed some help dealing with Microsoft. So, they hired someone they thought would be the perfect fit for the job, a Microsoft exec named Pete Parsons. But this new employee had an agenda of his own, and one day, way down the line, he'd be the reason for Bungie's downfall. For now though, he was just the new guy. In the 90s, Pete was the director of Xbox game marketing. During the development of Halo CE, he apparently fell in love with what Bungie was doing and wanted to get involved. So he applied for the role of studio manager, and given his experience at Microsoft, he felt like the perfect fit. He was hired in 2002 and would be the new person dealing with Microsoft on Bungie's behalf, discussing things like marketing, planning, and negotiating. For Halo 2, Bungie wanted assurances that their hard work wouldn't just be to line the pockets of Microsoft. They wanted their cut, especially if the game was successful. So, Microsoft agreed to work something out. Second, Parsons had to deal with Microsoft's unrealistic expectations for how long it would take to finish the game. Everything about Halo 2 was going to be bigger, better, and shinier, but they would need more time and resources to accomplish them. Microsoft initially wanted Halo 2 to release in 2002, less than 1 year after Halo Combat Evolved. The Bungie team made it clear that this would be impossible, and if Halo 2 is going to be a sequel, they'd need a lot more time than that.
More time. Yeah, everybody used a lot more time.
Honestly, you know what's funny? This is all the way back in the 2000s, and this is still so true even today.
They convinced Microsoft to extend the deadline to 2004.
It's honestly even more true
by
now.
Today's standards, but it was enough that the team felt like they could breathe a little. One of the first things they started working on was a tech demo to show fans at E3 2003. And what they created, well, it blew people out of their seats. But the demo they created was smoke and mirrors. The Bungie team had gotten so excited to show off all the new things their engine could do, things like dynamic lighting and revamped physics, that they got a little carried away. The demo was too good, and it would be impossible for them to create a full game that would live up to those standards. But they had to get it done, and Parsons began cracking the whip. He made it clear that there would be no deadline extensions, no canceling the project, and no lifeboat. Halo 2 was going to get finished whether the team liked it or not. What followed was one of the most infamous crunches in game development history. The team essentially lived at the studio, working day and night, and the devs nearly killed themselves trying to get the game out the door. Parsons, as studio manager, was blamed for the lack of planning that led to the inhumane work conditions, but the Bungie team, against all odds, managed to pull it off.
You can actually play the demo now? Really?
It was to resounding applause. The fans loved it. The critics loved it. It sold 2.4 million copies and generated more than $125 million.
I need you to listen to everything I'm about to say before saying anything. Crunch sucks. It's ass, right? It is horrible. But it was an amazing game. I feel like if you actually got rewarded for your work, there's a lot of people that are actually okay with it. Not saying like, you know, not like it's a good thing, but there are people out there that are willing to put in crazy amounts of work for something if it has a crazy payoff. They live for it, right? People refuse to admit that crunch has led to some amazing games. The problem with crunch, though, is because they will never see the benefits of their work. People aren't robots. Burnout is real. Absolutely. It absolutely is true. However, though, the reason why crunch sucks today is because why would you want to get crunched really hard to make something and get paid the same amount, if not less, than if you did it over a longer period of time, right? Like people always they use it as like one of their biggest talking points of like when they're like anti like unions of like construction workers or like trains or something like that. It's because like, you know, if they're taking their damn time, they're like, oh, that must be a union guy. He's taking all day. And it's like, because it's more beneficial for them to take a long time because they get paid more over time, right? If a small studio, smaller studios with lower budgets are killing it for sure. And if you actually benefited from the insane crunch, I feel like people would do it. I do it with stream stuff, right? Like anytime there's like big drops, like for like Rivals or Overwatch stuff, and I have like an insane day, you see those are the 20-hour stream days every time. Like that first day, if it's kicking, I'm here until I'm literally falling asleep on my keyboard every single time. And I will do it with a smile. I will do it every single goddamn time with a smile on my face because I can confidently look you in the eyes and say it is worth absolutely every inch of pain and mental anguish that it brings. It absolutely is worth it every single time. If I could do that every single day, I would do it every single day. Greed, oof. There is nothing wrong with you wanting to make more money and to have a better life for yourself and for your family and your potential family. That is not greed. There is nothing wrong with that. You should always be trying to look out for your best interests as long as you're not harming others. It does not harm anyone in this world, on this planet, by me streaming 20 hours for a day. It doesn't hurt any of you. But at what costs? What do you mean what costs? One day of I didn't sleep well, one day of I'm going to be a little sore the next morning. That's not greed. You're capitalizing on an opportunity. There's a lot of people that are going to show up looking for their drops and lots of new people that are going to be looking for streams. And so I absolutely reap the reward and I will go all in on that. And I think there's a lot of people that agree with that and would do it too. So just a bit of food for thought, I guess, on the whole crunch thing. Because crunch really does suck. But I feel like if smaller studios actually had more power and you actually, saw the benefit, I feel like there's crazy people out there that would be like, I'm in. Like, let's crunch really hard and make this the best game possible, you know?
In its
small
first
food for
24
thought.
hours. Microsoft was making money hand over fist, and it looked like the profit-sharing deal they made with Microsoft would make everyone at Bungie filthy rich. Except for one thing. Microsoft backed out of the arrangement. The Bungie team was furious. Microsoft had lied to them. They refused to pay them what they had promised, and even worse, they were asking for yet another Halo game.
This is where things get bad. This is where things fall apart.
Bungie was torn. They'd just been betrayed and were ready to walk away for real, but they also felt they at least had to finish Halo 3 for the sake of their fans. They powered through the development of Halo 3, a much smoother affair than Halo 2, and what they came out with was, well, one of the greatest FPS games ever made. Halo 3 was...
This is great. Oh, well, this is just getting screwed. It's not even... I don't even know if... I guess it is technically by definition, but this is like, they just straight up betrayed them. Because like, they made an agreement, they made a deal, and then they lied and didn't go through with it. That's just all the way through.
Lauded for its story, its multiplayer, its Forge and theater modes. It was breaking sales records left, right, and center, and proved the power of the brand new Xbox 360. But back at the studio, things couldn't have been worse.
Yeah, it's backstabbing and greed,
before
I think.
Halo 3's
I think it's
release,
both.
the team was unable to finalize a deal with Microsoft. Parsons was failing to make headway on negotiations, and two of the most important people working on Halo 3, founder Jason Jones and art designer Marcus Lato, straight up quit before being convinced to come back to the table. As a show,
Did you know only two people in history have beat Lasso Deathless.
solidarity, Parsons also offered to
Did not know
resign
that.
if he couldn't secure a deal. After some heated debate with other members of the team, Jones and
What is
Leto
your
were convinced to
skincare
stay.
routine? You're kinda
However,
glowing.
when the group was deciding
I don't
what
have
to do
one.
with Pete Parsons,
Thank you, though.
a few members believed he'd been double dealing, playing Bungie to help out Microsoft. So they took him up on his offer to resign, saying goodbye to Parsons with a pizza party. With Parsons gone,
With a
Microsoft
pizza
realized
party?
Bungie was
That's
serious
kinda
about
goated.
leaving, and the two parties finalized a deal on July 7th, 2007. The deal said that Bungie would develop 2 more Halo games, Halo 3 ODST and Halo Reach, before leaving to become independent and hand off the Halo IP to the newly founded 343 Industries in 2010. Microsoft would remain as a minority equity interest for the next few years as Bungie transitioned away. The
No clue if you're gonna see this, but I was the guy at the start of the stream who said I got back into ZZZ because you're VOD. I don't know what any of that means.
deal
wasn't happy
was
for you.
pretty good, but not being allowed to take the Halo IP with them is a decision many lament to this day. As Halo composer Marty O'Donnell put it,
We should be independent. We should own our own IP. We should never let a big corporation own the intellectual property that we're creating. As creators, we should own our intellectual property.
when the news broke, fans
Real.
were shocked. But even more shocking was what came next. But before we get into that, do you hear that? Do you know what that is?
Uh-oh.
That's the most wonderful sound in the world.
Is this a
That's
sponsor?
the sound
Is it War Thunder?
of War Thunder. War Thunder,
Saw that one coming. W sponsor, I guess. All right, let's keep going.
as I was saying, Bungie leaving Microsoft was a shock, but the biggest shock was yet to come. In 2010, Bungie signed a new contract with one of Microsoft's biggest competitors, Activision. The contract was a 10-year,
Uh-oh.
$500 million
Uh-oh.
deal that would allow Bungie to have creative control over their new game and retain ownership
Uh-oh.
of the new Destiny IP. In exchange, Activision would be in charge of all publishing and marketing for the game, allowing the creative team at Bungie to focus on making the game. But this new partnership wasn't all sunshine and flowers.
No.
Sure, Bungie had managed to get away from Microsoft, but much like the Flood in Halo, they had some parasites aboard the ship who were destroying them from the inside. One of those was Harold Ryan. Ryan was a Microsoft playtester in the late 90s who was hired on at Bungie around the same time as Pete Parsons. When Parsons resigned in 2006, Ryan took over his role as Bungie's studio manager. After the release of Halo 3, he was promoted
Am I mean for saying that they look like the same person? I can't describe it to you, but they look like the exact same person. I know they don't. I know they're not. I know they don't look it. But for some reason, in my head,
his role as
the
Bungie's
second this happened, I thought they were the same guy.
studio manager. After the release of Halo 3, he was promoted to company CEO and would be in charge of overseeing ODST, Reach, and the upcoming game Destiny. To help get all of these projects off the ground, Bungie needed a marketing wizard who understood the games they were making. Up until this point, Marty O'Donnell had been doing the job, but he was struggling a little bit. So Ryan hired the only person he could think of, Pete Parsons.
Oh, not
As you'd
again.
expect, many veterans at Bungie were worried about the move, but justified it by saying that Parsons was a phenomenal marketer who would help them sell their games. Plus, with Bungie leaving Microsoft, there wouldn't be any conflict of interest. Still, it was hard to ignore the fact that Bungie suddenly had 2 ex-Microsoft employees in the highest position of the company. And once the deal with Activision was signed in 2010, it became clear that Microsoft's profits-first culture had infected Bungie. It started in 2011. With their newfound freedom, Bungie could take their new game in whatever direction they wanted. Unfortunately, not everyone was aligned, and divisions started to form. On one side, there were the business guys like Ryan and Parsons. On the other were the veteran creatives who actually made the games. Jamie Griezmann-
There's, you know what? Honestly, I'm getting flashbacks to old Blizzard stuff. I'm getting the
architect
flashbacks.
of Halo CE's 30 Seconds of Fun, Joe Staten, the man who wrote the Halo trilogy, Paul Bertone, design director, Marcus Leto, art director, and Martin O'Donnell, game composer
Should've
and
just trusted
Bungie
him.
founder. Starting in 2011, in the midst of working on Destiny 1, those on the creative side of things started leaving the company rather unexpectedly.
That's
The first
when
to
things
leave
get
was
real
Jamie
bad.
Griezmann. He cited burnout and frustration at the lack of direction Bungie had for Destiny 1. This was followed by Paul Bertone in 2012, then Joe Staten in 2013, and finally, Marcus Leto quit in 2014, citing the
So all the
crunch
important
culture
people that
fostered
actually
by
make
Pete
the product
Parsons
are leaving?
as one of the main reasons for his leaving.
Certain will be fine because
We just get rid of the very
we'll be fine because the corporate people are
best
still
designer
there.
we've ever had. And he goes, yeah, we did. I'm like, okay, how does that make sense? Like our total design power, went from here down to here, and with no plan on fixing the deficit. And he's like, yeah, you're right.
But it gets even worse. These creatives, some of whom made up Bungie's board of directors, began disappearing one by one, leaving people scratching their heads. One of those reasons was the fact that they had founder stock from when the company went independent in 2010, which would vest if they stayed with the company for a certain period of time. Rather than let these veterans have their founder stock, those we just listed were likely offered separation deals where they would be paid X amount of money in exchange for their resignation.
Wait, they took their stocks?
On top of having the stock returned to Bungie, these deals had the added benefit of letting Ryan and Parsons stack the board of directors in their favor.
Oh,
the plan
no.
was working, and they just had one more person
Actual
to get rid of,
hostile
Marty
takeover.
O'Donnell. But he wouldn't back down so easily. Seeing what was happening to those around him, Marty refused to accept any sort of deal, essentially daring the leadership to fire him. When they did fire him in 2014, he retaliated with a lawsuit, saying he was wrongfully let go and was due his founder stock. Not long after, he won the suit, confirming for many what was happening behind closed doors. Sadly, by 2014, the core Bungie creatives who
That's kind of base, though, you know, knowing that you're the writing's on the wall and baiting them into doing it too early and then getting to sue them and win. That's kind of a Chad move right there.
Mostly gone. Ryan and Parsons were now firmly in control of the company's direction. Thankfully, people were excited for their new game, whatever it would be. Following a huge marketing campaign from Activision, Destiny broke records with over 4 million pre-orders and made more than $500 million on day one. The game looked stunning. The gunplay.
I played Destiny 1 all the way up to level 30. I thought it was great, but it was a little slow on content, at least when I played in the original. And so I ended up putting it down and just never going back to it. And then I picked up Destiny 2. I played the entire thing. I played the campaign, got to level 30. And then I came to PC, and then I never touched it again. Mile gaming 25 months, though. Appreciate it.
Play felt great, and the guys that made Halo just hit another home run. At least, that's what it seemed like on day one. It quickly became apparent that the game wasn't quite finished when it came out. Missions were cut and pasted repetitively. The game's story was fractured, with much of the lore hidden behind grimoire cards that were only viewable on Bungie's website. The game's main storyline had about 8 hours of total gameplay. This was not the massive MMO shared world experience that Bungie had promised, and the game did not feel finished.
Yeah, I do remember the game feeling kind of repetitive. That's why I stopped playing. Oh my god, I completely forgot. That's why I stopped playing. Yeah, I remember, dude, these tank missions and like just having to grind these over and over to get better gear. Oh, the memories are coming back. Real.
Many pointed fingers at Activision for pushing Destiny out the door before it was done. And of course, that was true. Activision during this time was known for caring about one thing and one thing only:
money!
But there was other turmoil behind the scenes that made it difficult to finish the game on time. Destiny's development was fraught with issues, including the game.
Yo, thank you for the big $20 super chat on the YouTube side.
I just vibing
looking at videos today, though. Appreciate you.
And veterans leaving left, right, and center. Still, Destiny was a commercial success, and after several DLCs, the game started to take shape. Bungie fleshed the story out, they introduced raids and a ton of other story elements.
But, okay, even as good as Destiny kind of recovered, right? I feel like it was okay at this time, but like now as time has marched forward, people are less and less okay with games releasing in a broken, not finished state. And so you just put it down and you never
and it finally looked like Destiny was going to reach its full potential. But then, just when Bungie looked like they were about to redeem their game, two things happened. First, in 2016, Ryan stepped down as CEO, leaving the position to be filled by the one man we hoped would never sit on the throne, Pete Parsons. But second, they did something that really, really pissed players off. They announced that they were ending Destiny 1. This was a punch in the face for many players. They'd spent a lot of time in Destiny 1 progressing their characters, grinding for loot, and expecting the game to last for, well, more than 3 years. Destiny was a live service game, which meant people would, over a period of time, pay for DLCs and other updates with the expectation that the game would stay online. The understanding is that all the time and money they invest would carry over a period of years. Unfortunately, there was money to be made.
That's not how it went.
The justification was that Destiny 1's game engine had some limitations that made it difficult for Bungie to keep updating the game, especially with the Xbox Series X and PS5 on the horizon. So, the only option was to rebuild the game in a new, modified engine. However, that meant a new, full-price game with all progression from the original being reset. Needless to say, people weren't too happy. But this was always the plan. Just 2 months after Destiny 1's release.
So, okay. In a world where that ends up being true, right? Like, how do you do it well? I feel like you kind of have to leave the first game like online. Like, you still have to support it, right? You can't just let it go. Like, let people naturally work their way to the new one. Or just carry over the progress some way. Well, to my knowledge, it has to be all reprogrammed again. Like, you can't just like, it's not like just unplugging your memory card out of your PlayStation 2 and plugging it into someone else's, right? It takes a very long time to get stuff like transferred, quote unquote, right? It has to be all redone. So you're basically rebuilding the entire same game again, which is like, well, then you're not even making new content. Overwatch 2, kinda, yeah. We actually have seen that with Overwatch 2, where they basically just spent the first 2 years rebuilding Overwatch 1, and then like finally are able to start building like towards things that are like actually new, right? Destiny 1 is still online and being serviced to this day, so thankfully they did not kill the servers. There's just new content, but people can still play it. Oh, really? So wait a minute, hang on. So even though you can still access Destiny 1, people were really mad that Destiny 2, you couldn't bring your stuff over? Interesting. I feel like that's kind of the best way you could have done that then. You know what I mean? All right, let me keep it rolling.
Activision Publishing CEO Eric Hirschberg said in an interview, quote,
people just wanted D1 to be updated. I guess that's also fair. That is fair.
Work had already begun on future expansion packs, as well as on our next full game release. They revamped the progression system and put in a ton of new microtransactions, in-game currencies, expensive cosmetics,
that's where you fall off the rails.
Tons of grinding. It felt like players were being forced to
that's how you fall off the rails. You charge a price for it, right? You go all in on microtransactions, you make them basically migrate, and if they don't migrate, then they got nothing. Yeah, okay, all right, I understand now.
So that Bungie and Activision could cash in on restarting their progression. And it only got worse as the years dragged on. Eventually, it became apparent that despite a large player base, Destiny 2 wasn't the cash cow they had hoped for. The Forsaken expansion in 2018 was critically acclaimed by fans, but Activision labeled it as a commercial failure, with Activision's COO saying Destiny 2, quote, was not meeting financial expectations. So, Activision and Bungie went into talks about parting ways. A few months later, and with some help, Pete Parsons negotiated with NetEase for a $100 million investment, and Bungie broke away from Activision in early 2019. From 2019 to 2020.
So hang on, let me get this straight. Bungie went from Microsoft to Activision to NetEase. Oh, you guys are so smart over there.
Bungie was on a redemption tour, with many attributing it to their independence. But the honeymoon wouldn't.
Geniuses.
Once again, after only 3 years of independence, Bungie started running out of money. Players who had been around for years were having the time of their lives.
Oh, isn't like Sony coming up?
And therefore actually wasn't making that much money. Fortunately, someone had their eye on Bungie for quite some time. Sony offered
here we go.
$3.6 billion to buy them out. Despite a history of being burned by Microsoft and oppressed by Activision, and despite knowing that this kind of thing usually ends badly, Parsons simply could not say no to that much money. So, for the third time, Bungie was sold to the highest bidder. Thankfully, this acquisition felt much more equitable for Bungie. They wouldn't be beholden to developing exclusively for the PlayStation, they would be allowed to keep the Destiny IP and own any new IPs in the future, and there wouldn't be any layoffs. Sony viewed Bungie as a key asset that would be a huge part of their 10-year live service plan, so they set aside $1.2 billion and put it towards employee retention. Basically, paying employees extra not to leave the company. In an industry like video games, this was a breath of fresh air. People were expecting a huge wave of layoffs, so it was a relief to see Sony welcoming them in with open arms. But it wasn't
there's
Sony
always
they
a
had
catch.
to worry about, because the call was coming from inside the house. In 2023, Destiny 2's The Final Shape DLC and Marathon were both delayed, due to a wave of layoffs initiated by Pete Parsons. Parsons took to Twitter to share his condolences for those he just laid off, claiming that the commercial failure of D2's Lightfall DLC was part of the reason. Just a year prior, Sony had put $1.2 billion aside to keeping everyone around, and none of that money went into, well, keeping everyone around. But this was a drop in the bucket compared to what happened in 2024. The Final Shape would be the latest DLC for Destiny 2. Prior to its release, many felt that its success would dictate whether Bungie would have another round of layoffs or not. Thankfully, it ended up being both commercially and critically a smash hit. With all sorts of money coming in, employees finally felt like they were safe. So imagine their surprise when just 2 months later, on July 30th, 17% of the company, aka 220 employees, were laid off with no warning. Some were told in short
Wait, I
meetings
actually do
and asked
vaguely
not to
remember
spread
this.
it around. Some discovered they were let go when they tried to sign in the next morning and found themselves locked out of their accounts. Parsons put out his own condolences, saying, quote, "Today is a sad day at Bungie as we say goodbye to colleagues who have all
where
made
have
a
I read this somewhere
impact on our
before?
studio. It was incredibly
Looks no
tone
different.
deaf. Given
Hang
the
on.
fact
Hang on. Wait a minute. Where's the other one? Chat, tell me the difference between these two tweets. Chat, they're the exact same tweet. Oh, it's the same date? Oh, that explains it a lot then.
colleagues who
They
have
didn't show the same tweet twice
all
then.
made a significant impact on our studio. It was incredibly tone
I was
deaf,
reading the words. I
given the
wasn't
fact
reading.
that
I
he
wasn't
was
looking at the
one
date.
who initiated the layoffs in the first place. To make matters worse,
I figured they wouldn't show the same tweet for both layoffs.
employees were intentionally let go on the 30th of the month, so Bungie wouldn't have to pay for
And
their
the second one had
benefits.
two
The
tweets,
exact
so.
same thing they did 1 year prior during the last round of layoffs. Some were even terminated a week before their maternity leave kicked in. And as though history were repeating itself, the whole issue of founders stock came back into play. After going independent
it's all
again,
down to
certain
stocks
veterans had
again,
stock
huh?
with vested interest, saying if they stayed with the company until X date, they would receive a certain amount of shares as compensation. However, if they left the company for whatever reason, being laid off included, that stock would be forfeited and restored to Bungie the company.
That is so omega evil. Yo, yeah, like if you accept a compensation package, let's say they're like, oh, we'll give you 50K a year, right? But if you stay with us for 3 years, we'll give you a 100K bonus. And you're like, you know what? 50K is a little bit less than I wanted to make, but in 3 years, that 100K, I'm gonna be able to buy a house. And at 2.8 years later, they're like, actually, get the fuck out. Oh
Throughout
my
2023 and
goodness.
2024, plenty of veterans said goodbye to Bungie. Destiny 2 director Joe Blackthorne passed on the torch. Game director Chris Barrett was fired. But this round of layoffs targeted some of the most important and most experienced devs at the company. Mark
Sorry, mostly the
Noseworthy,
21
who worked
months,
on
right?
Reach and both Destinies, Luke Smith, who is one of Bungie's most important devs since the Halo days, and Michael Salvatore, Marty O'Donnell's co-composer on both Halo and Destiny. It's unclear if they were laid off or if they took separation deals like the ones back in the early 2010s, but either way, 3 of the last remaining Bungie veterans were all gone within days of each other. The blame
Wait, during this time while working from home, Bungie got a new HQ, and Pete said that they were not a company that cut executive compensation.
This is why Megacore are terrible to work for.
True. Thank you for the 6 months.
Name fell
Yeah.
squarely on Pete Parsons. It was his decision to downsize and put people out of a job. Sony had tried to keep people around, but Bungie had initiated the layoffs. And throughout it all, Parsons spent more than $2 million on vintage cars. Yikes. These layoffs could not have come at a worse time. Bungie was gearing up to unveil
Wait, is that the guy who like showed off like some super nice car to an employee and then laid them off the next day or like the next week or that week? Is that the same guy? Is that the same guy? Bro, imagine how crazy that is. Imagine you have an employee that you're about to fire or about to let go next week because it's already pre-planned, and you take them outside and you're like, yo, come look at my new Lamborghini. And you show them the new Lamborghini and they're like, holy shit, that's such a cool car. And they're like looking at it and they're like, dude, I love these kind of cars. Oh man, I hope I can afford one of these one day. And you can look at it and be like, yeah, someday when you work your way up the corporate ladder, you can buy a Lamborghini just like me. And then 3 days later, actually, you're fired. Get the fuck out. Like, what kind of evil villain do you have to be? How do you even do that? How do you look someone in the eye and do that? You know, like,
a massive project they'd been working on for the past few years, but now they were missing almost 1/5 of their workforce. The game is called Marathon. Bungie released a few teasers throughout 2024, and on April 12th, 2025, the world finally got its first look at Marathon's gameplay.
Marathon is a team-based extraction shooter set around the mysterious and cutthroat world of Tau Ceti 4.
Ahead of the reveal, tons of creators were given early access to play the game and give viewers their thoughts. Unfortunately, the reception wasn't what Bungie had hoped for.
It seems like you're playing an extraction shooter that to me sometimes feels like a battle royale, and that's kind of it.
More and more information started coming.
I talked about this earlier when we were just doing the just chatting stuff, but like, I think weirdly we've hit a saturation point with AAA FPS multiplayer shooter games. I think the next year is going to be dominated by co-op PvE single player experience games. I think that is the next year. Indie, single player, co-op PvP PvE or PvP PvE type games is going to dominate. I think obviously your Omega Titans, your Valorants, your Overwatch, your CS, your like, you know what I mean? Like, those guys will be fine. Apex, they'll be fine. Like, they won't die. They're not going to go anywhere. But they are never going to hit their peaks again. They're all toast. Everyone's sick of them. Everyone's sick of all of them. Everyone's done. Everyone's pissed. If Rivals has made me learn anything, is that being the melting pot game of every other game, bumping into the COD players, the Apex players, the Valorant players, the Overwatch players, the Fortnite players, they're all pissed off. They all hate it here. I think it's time, chat.
Out about it, and now I'm just like, it's not
Toss it in
yet
Miss
at
Edmonds.
disappointment, but it's more so towards confusion.
$40.
The super chat go off real quick. Think of the big super chat.
This is why I hope Sony keeps pushing Marathon out and it flops. So Bungie gets consolidated and the executives get pushed out.
And if I don't know if that would ever even
live
happen.
service game with all of the trappings, no proximity chat. What are you
Don't
guys
forget
thinking?
that during this
The hype
time
for this
they went free to play but still locked some content behind a paywall, abandoned PvP, and decreased the amount of cosmetics that came with the base game and pumped up the paid cosmetics. We went 4 years without a single new PvP map.
Cinematic trailer in
That's
2024 was all but dead, and this new extraction shooter felt like it was already late to the party. The issues are due to Bungie being in a leadership crisis. All of the veterans who made Halo and Destiny are basically gone, and many feel that Bungie employees are just staying to get the game out the door and plan to leave as soon as it releases. With so many key members gone from the company over the last 2 years, it's a wonder who's still around to develop it. But the big question is, what will happen to Pete Parsons? Gamers from all around the world are calling for him to step down and be held accountable for what's happening at Bungie, but as we all know, that doesn't happen to CEOs. More than likely, if Marathon fails, Parsons and the rest of the shareholders will be laughing to the bank while us players sit here and wonder, whatever happened to the company that made Halo? Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video.
Dude, Action Owl, these videos are always bangers. Actual bangers every time. This is why it's always important to remember that IPs don't mean shit. Companies don't mean shit. It's always about the people who make it, right? That's how games that used to be really good can become really bad, and how games that maybe aren't so good can become good. You know, like both of those can end up kind of being true, depending on what happens, depending on who stays, who goes, whatever ends up going on. But yeah, dude, these are always fire. I love these videos. They're really, really good.